All right, so we're going to start with our do now question that I had you looking at while I was checking the notes, and it says, what is the cult of domesticity? And do you believe it still exists in modern society? So our do now question will be worth seminar points. In just a minute, we will go through our actual norms for seminar, but let's make sure we're getting into the question today. So let's start by somebody telling me, what's the cult of domesticity to start off? Go ahead, Charlie.
People basically believe that women start to be allowed to do like household duties and things like that. And I think it is still present in society, but like within certain cultures.
Explain.
I don't want to really talk to people. Most of immigrants, they're not really accustomed to our living style yet, so they still bring their culture over there.
Good. So Charday established for us what the cult of domesticity is, this idea that we have gender roles, specifically for which gender? Women, right? And that those roles have been well established inside of the household throughout history. But we're going to start to see during this era, women are going to start to push back a little bit about those actual roles. So I'll ask more people. Does it still exist in society today? Jeremiah, what do you think?
I would say yes, but like in the Middle Eastern region, women are still fighting for their rights.
Okay, I would agree with you on there. Let's focus our attention to here, the United States. Since we're doing a U.S. history course, let's be a little bit more critical of American society ourselves. Matthew?
I think it still exists, but at a much smaller level than it has in years prior. But even at its beginning, a lot of it supported for women, as it is today.
Good point. Maya?
So I agree with Matthew. Today, still some of the values that they push today, you can see in traditional households today, like the mother take care of the kids, they cook, she cooks. More women can cook, more than men, basically.
So my question to you would be, why does this still exist?
Because, I mean, it's in our society, it's what works. Like, what I'm not saying it's right, but it's what works for America.
Okay. Would we agree with her? That this idea of we have these gender roles, this idea of the woman being the caretaker and possibly taking care of the home, and even though that is something that Matthew has told us is not nearly to the extent it used to be, it's still there. And so would we agree that, it kind of works, so why wouldn't it still be there? Jewel?
So I agree with Maya, it's what America knows. Like, this is how it's grown, this is how it's been since, back then, and this is how it's going to continue as, women always in the kitchen and stuff and taking care of the kids and stuff. The father goes to work, comes home, and it's just that. Like, that's just how society is going to keep going, because that's what they're known for.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Julia?
It's like kind of similar of being a housewife.
Explain.
Like, far as, people like being like a stay-at-home mom, which means you have to clean, take care of the kids.
But have to is an interesting phrase to put into that. Do you have to, or have we kind of been brainwashed over generations to believe that that's the role a woman's supposed to take?
I mean, no, but it's like that's their job.
Or have you just been told that's your job? DeMarge?
That's what comes with being a housewife.
Explain.
Like, when you look for a general housewife, that's the things that they do. Like, that's what you think they're gonna do.
So I want to press everybody's comfort level a little bit. So hands down for just a second, okay, because we're going to come back to this. We're going to spend a lot of time on women's rights today and women's roles. But I want to bring up just two different topics, or two terms. And I want you, without going ahead and telling me verbally, I want you to think, do these things still sound strange to you? Okay? Do these two things sound strange to you? Male nurse. Female construction worker. I'm even seeing snickers at this point. Ms. Lyles, why is that odd?
Because you don't see as many females, like, for example, outside. When you walk outside to see the construction workers, you see males, all males. You don't normally see females working construction. When you think of construction workers, you wouldn't think of females. And when you think of nurses, you think of women. Like, it is male nurses out here, but when you hear nurse, you think of women.
Yeah, because women can't do construction, right?
No.
What? No, they can. They can. I'm not saying that they can't.
That's not a typical job.
Why? Keep the hand system. Why? Why is that not the typical job? Why is it that we have ingrained in our brain that there are these gender norms that we have, whether it be staying in the household for women, whether it be this concept of certain lines of work or women's work or men's work. And it's 2019 and we still have things like housewife. Does stay-at-home dad sound weird? Okay, maybe we're making a little progress here. Heavenly, you've been patient?
In my opinion, I don't think it sounds weird. Sure, it doesn't like roll off the tongue as much as like a male construction worker or just a female nurse. But in my opinion, I think that it's been like that because people see women as something that is so fragile, being like where like the reproductive system like is. So like they get birth, so I feel like they see them as so fragile, so they give them these fragile jobs and positions in society.
See, I would push back and tell you that the nursing job is not fragile whatsoever. That that's a very difficult job. So why is it do we think that women, in terms of women's work, seems to be in places like the household, or as nannies, or as nurses? What is the one thing that we seem to kind of force upon women a certain role? What is it?
Basically, women have the job of nurturing since it's their child. They have the it's built in our in women's genetics to take care of their child. You can see this from early societies, even in the caveman. These social norms be placed since men are structurally built more stronger, and they can actually build and do all this stuff, and women since.
That's well said. Yeah. And so we're going to take this deeper. And I'm going to put hands down for just a second because we need to start taking this into history, okay? But this idea of gender norm is where I want you to start thinking about when we're going into this unit, okay? Do we still have these gender norms today? Well, you just essentially told me, yes, we do, okay? Are they as extreme as they have been? No. Are they completely gone? Not really either. So let's quickly review, just for the purposes of making sure we're all on the same page with logistics, our seminar norms for today. Please always remember, seminars out of 10 points. Your goal, do not talk over each other. It's one conversation at a time. You know this. You've been doing this for most of the year. Arguments need answers to be backed up with evidence, quotes, and data, or you're going to hear me say what? Prove it. Thank you. Add to your notes. After each discussing question, you will see me put up our key takeaways. Make sure you're adding those things to your notes, please. Remember, this is a college-educated conversation, so please avoid slang. You heard some of your peers doing some great stuff, I want to challenge what they said or piggyback on what they said. That is our goal. Remember, the goal is volleyball, not ping pong. Somebody real quickly explain to me what the heck I mean by that. Zion?
Okay, so ping pong basically, the conversation's going back and forth between two people, but volleyball is going in between multiple people.
Sure. So rather it being me than you, then me than you, the goal should be you guys talk and then I talk. 1, 2, 3, then I talk. That's more volleyball, okay? So speak to each other, not just to me. Remember, no participation equals a 0 for your seminar score, and we will be taking care of the exit slip when we get into our quiz. So we're going to start with question number 1, which you had for your discussion questions, and it says, how did new consumer practices arising from industrialization reshape America's gender, class, and relationships? All right. Raven, you can start us off.
So ping pong basically, the conversation's going back and forth between two people, but volleyball is going in between multiple people.
Sure. Very good. Julia.
Industrialization led to the new focus in consumerism.
Okay, so let's go into consumerism. Somebody explain to me what consumerism is, and then why it's important specifically for this era. Matthew, go ahead.
Consumerism is just the desire to have material things, and why it's specifically important for this unit is because this is the first time that we have mass scale production globally and all across the United States, and where people actually have access to buy things.
Good. Now when you say access to buy things, we're moved into this time period of industrialization, so it's mass production of goods. Why does that make it more accessible to people, though? Because we talked about you don't get paid all that well during this era either. So why does this make things more accessible to them? Caleb?
Well, I think it's because the businesses are smarter, and they advertise to more upper class, middle class women, and a lot of upperclassmen, so they can make more money.
Yep. Okay, so we definitely see advertising comes out at this time, and it's targeted advertising. Very good. Mira?
Okay, so department stores just came out, and they targeted women and families.
Why? Why do women care so much about going to department stores and going and buying the latest technologies and things? Especially when we know some of these women that were doing this, they didn't really have the amount of money needed to do it, but they were still doing it anyways. Why would somebody purchase things when they don't really need them or don't really have the money for them? What is the purpose behind this? Michael?
Alright, so with men, they was like the more busier people, so like they at work, so they not really worried about technology and stuff like that. But females, since they more stay at home, they might need something to do, and everybody want the newest stuff.
So they've got a little bit more leisure time to be able to do those things. That's well said. Jeremiah?
I want to figure out what Nero said.
Please do.
Because the norm was that women had to be with men to go to like stores and amusement parks and stuff. But when a woman was by herself, she was like chastised and like persecuted because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Heavenly.
In terms of like why do people buy things that you prepared for, in addition to what Michael said, it's all about like looking the part. So like some workers, even though they couldn't really afford things in the store that they worked at, they use like their customer discount, employee discount, to like still buy and wear things at the store so it can look like they can afford to shop.
So what is the key word here? Okay, keeping up appearances is how Heavenly put it. And that's a really strong way to put it. But we've brought up this word before in class, and I brought it up when we were talking about the last place aversion, when we talked about how some people will make choices that harm themselves as long as they're not last. What is this key word that I'm really trying to hone in on here?
Is it perspective?
Not necessarily perspective. It's going to be more about this idea of I need to look the part. Okay? For the guys in here, I would tell you, and shoot, I should say even the girls, why do you go out and always want to get the nicest looking new sneakers? Kicks. Why? Sade?
Parents and basically like, I don't know.
But you having the newest ones, the best ones, the rarest ones.
I've been last.
So there it is, status. Status is the key here, right? So women in society at this time, they cared, and so did men, about status. Because like we were told in the very, very beginning, we started to see the developing of classes. Our middle class really starts to make its way into the country at this time. Not nearly as much, and the rich and the poor class are going to be way divided from each other. But it's this idea that I need to look better than somebody else. And so that is always going to be in the back of people's minds, this idea of status. Manaya?
I want to ask something else that's different. There's industrialization changed, like, it made classes even more split when electricity came into part.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Because when electricity came in, people, working class members or people that serve rich people, they lost jobs due to technological things that were coming in.
What do we call that? That's a movement we need to be concerned with in your life moving forward. And this is one of those things where we love to make connections between the things we're learning about in the past and why is this relevant to us today. She told us essentially that some of these house workers are starting to lose their jobs because of inventions. Why do I need a maid when there's a washing machine now? Why do I need somebody to vacuum all the rugs, or to beat the rugs outside, I should say, when there's vacuum cleaners now? What do we call this, and why should we be a little concerned about this in society today, this idea of losing jobs to technology? Maya?
So, I don't know the term, but I can explain today.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically contributing to this society's basically laziness. You can see new inventions like Amazon Echo, Amazon thing taking place of you actually like going into the store.
Sure.
So basically new inventions are like taking people out of jobs. Like before, you could see in the past people like, I'm gonna give an example, like building cars. Basically, it was people for each part. Now it's just a whole machine, just factorized, and people have been losing jobs. They have to go into a new industry or basically be out of work.
So which makes what key? If you know that all of these jobs that we're replacing with technology are going away, okay? And I'll tell a quick story to make you understand the concept. Last year, I remember going to a McDonald's, and I rarely go to a McDonald's, so I hadn't been inside one in over a year. There was only one employee. That's it. And it was the person cooking. Because when I walked in, there were these big pillars of touch screens. And I placed my entire order without talking to a human. Then I put my credit card in, and then all of a sudden the person came out with my meal. It was the only person there. Now, that sounds awesome and fun and cool, except what about all those people that used to work at McDonald's? What's the key now if those types of jobs are being replaced? Charlotte?
I think it's really a money thing. Like, they're looking at technological advances. If I can invest my money into making things that will replace humans and I don't have to pay them, then they'll make their profit.
Yeah, I mean, a machine never asked for a raise, right? A machine never called in sick and said, I had a late night last night, boss. I'm not going to be able to make it in this morning. Machines are reliable, right? But what is the repercussion for us in society? Matthew?
Well, following this wave of industrialization and new inventions put a lot of people out of work, a lot of the lower class citizens, they began to look towards education, and everyone wanted to get a high school diploma, which is similar to today where everyone wants a college degree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Education becomes the key because all the low-skilled jobs will be replaced by technology. So the only way you're going to be able to access jobs that will be available will be through education. Now, this is not going to be a time period that just focuses on women. So how do some of these new inventions, especially the use of old inventions like the railroads, for example, for things like leisure, lead to some problems in race relations in the United States? Sion?
So, some like first-class cars started to be created for women specifically, and then African American women saw the opportunity to actually, use that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they will also face repercussions like chastisement and stuff like that because they racist.
So at a certain point, the government's going to step in because someone's going to sue, right? Mm-hmm. And this is going to get all the way up to the Supreme Court with an extremely famous Supreme Court case. Go ahead, Caleb, and tell me what you can about the Supreme Court case that is going to revolve around these idea of separate spaces in the railroads.
Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896
Very good.
upheld segregation and accommodations as the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Jim Crow laws.
Yes.
Basically.
Now, what is the phrase that we all need to remember that comes out of this case of Plessy versus Ferguson? Separate but equal. Okay. And that's going to be where we stop this one, and we're going to move to the screen. So you're going to be adding to your notes, please. So, one more. There we go. So a quick recap of this question, then we'll start getting into the next one, which will be number 4 on our discussion questions. So you told me that America began a consumer culture, which absolutely we did a nice job of talking about with materialism and this idea of consuming more things because for the first time they're readily available at a cheap rate because of mass production caused by industrialization. You told me about status. Status can be shown in society through your job, through fashion. We start to see women care more and more and more about having the latest fashion. And through technology. Okay, somebody mentioned the idea of electricity. Some homes had electricity, some didn't. Well, if you were one of those homes with electricity, that was a status symbol. That'd be like having that home that has the really expensive, awesome-looking car in the driveway. People will drive by and go, ooh, look at them. If you have your lights on, all of a sudden back then it was, whoa, they've got electricity. Used for pleasure are the railroads now, as people are going to start to ride the railroads, travel from one place to another for leisure type of reasons. But it definitely caused some racial conflict. Sion did a nice job telling us that in the beginning they divided things by the genders. And then when African American women tried making their way into the women's only section, we started to see that they started to classify race as well and segregate people, which led to the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which we know established, like Colin told us, separate but equal. And like Caleb mentioned to us, it ushers in the era of Jim Crow, where new laws are going to be placed to restrict African Americans' ability to exercise their newly earned freedoms throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s. Let's see if one of my Gov students can help me out. When is it going to be that this case is overturned? Nara?
Is it Brown versus Virginia?
Yeah, which is not until 1953, so we've got a little while until we're going to get there. So separate but equal will be the law of the land for close to 57 years in this country. Questions about any of these before we get into the next question?
I saw how you said like the status quo is like when women started to really care about like their appearance and stuff. So
I don't want to make it sound like it's just women.
Well,
Okay.
well, people in general.
Sure.
So did this give like the artist the momentum for that cartoon we looked at the other day where the bottom of it said something about your dress being too big to fit in the loader booth?
Let's talk about that cartoon real fast. I wish I had the ability to bring it up, but somebody explain to me what you saw. Ms. Hill, if you would like to, explain to me what you saw in that cartoon, and let's see if we can connect it.
Okay. So it was two officers standing right there. a voter booth, and a lady was trying to go in the voter booth, but the voter booth was real narrow, and her dress was huge.
And what were they saying essentially on the bottom?
You're just too big, you can't vote, how you gonna fit in the booth?
Yeah, so what was the point of that cartoon? Yes, it absolutely does relate there, so Ms. Hill, beautiful connection there. Mira?